So hi and welcome to the next episode of podcast Deep Talks. My today's guest is Dan Seewald. Dan is a former head of innovation at Pfizer, the worldwide innovation. So he has a lot of experience because Pfizer is a huge company, a Fortune 500 company, and they have about 100,000 employees. Is it right?
That's right.
So one of the biggest companies here in the US.
That's true.
And
one
then,
of the largest life science companies in the world.
And then you made a decision and you left and you started your own business.
Deliberate Innovation.
That's so cool. So I want to know everything from the beginning, how you get to Pfizer, what you did there as a head of innovation. And I want to know the difference between having startup and have a freedom and compare the style of leadership in big corporation and staff leadership if you have only a few people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe I'll start from the beginning and just tell you a little bit about kind of the journey. So I often say that my innovation background is atypical, but I think the notion of innovation is always atypical. Uh-huh. So my first career, if you will, was as a high school wrestling coach. So,
okay.
The sport wrestling in the Olympics, not the fake stuff with body slams, but I worked with coaching kids. And that was really instructive later on, I found, for working in innovation, because you have to build a culture as a coach. You have to inspire people to believe in a team. You have to be able to create purpose. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think of, innovation and even coaching a team as all about just getting results. And results do matter. We do measure ourselves and our performance by the results we get. But at the end of the day, the thing that changes and makes people from just regular competitors into champions is when you build a spirit or an ethos within the team. And I thought I was going to come in as a 20-year-old. I was still in college when I started coaching. I thought I would come in and I would teach them everything I know. I was a college wrestler myself, and I thought it was all about the technique. Just like with innovation, a lot of people think it's all about, I'm going to teach them design thinking or creative problem solving. Those are the tools. But the mindset, that's what makes all the difference. So I found very quickly as a coach that you have to think differently and you have to rally people to believe in something bigger than themselves. So that was maybe one of the most instructive. I then went to do something a little bit more mundane. I became a certified public accountant. Okay. Which is very different than being a wrestling coach. I studied it at my university. I wasn't sure that this is the path I wanted to take in my life, but there's a line in Shakespeare's Macbeth that I've waded so far out into blood that it's hard to turn back. You have to just keep going forward. Yeah. And some point in your life, you wade so far, it's easier to keep going forward than it is to go back. So for several years, I worked in a role of doing auditing. And I did a variety of things in auditing, from forensic auditing, which is tracking illegal or illicit behavior, and tracking also and doing business process audits to understand business. And it's interesting because sometimes doing things that you don't love are the things that instruct you later in life about what you will love. So that very quickly had informed me it's really valuable to be meticulous and analytical, but as a life's passion and pursuit, as a purpose, that wasn't the purpose I wanted to proceed. So I went through many different pivots in my career. And I think anybody who knows exactly what they wanted to do when they were growing up is blessed.
Yep.
I am not one of those blessed people. I think the majority of people are not. My wife knew from the time she was young that she was going to be a speech pathologist, and that's what she does, and that's what she loves.
Yeah, that's the blessing.
It is. And so I went from being a CPA to being a process engineer, to being a market researcher, to being a moderator, doing interviews, to being a marketer, to a new product developer, and eventually a head of marketing. And then about 6-7 years ago, really working in this vocation of innovation and applied creativity. So it's been this long, jagged process, which if I told you there was an intelligent design behind it, I would be lying to you. But it was all about knowing where your passion is and doing things that help get you there.
And maybe you just had the courage to do the change, because
it does.
Sometimes people are just stuck and they are not trying new things.
I agree. And I can still recall today from 18 years ago, I came home from work and I said to my wife, I don't love what I do. And my parents said to me, well, we didn't love what we did either. But my wife had the right mindset. She said to me, you got to pursue what you think you love.
Yep.
And try to find it. So you have to ask yourself, like, when have I been happiest in my life? When have I felt I created the most meaning? And when you can do that, then you start finding more and more what you're able and you should be doing. And it's a process, so you have to keep asking. I'm sure that in 30 years' time, that when someone asks me, what do you love doing? I'm still gonna say I'm in pursuit of it. And I think that's the human condition. The moment we stop being curious and trying to pursue a greater truth is the moment that we stop really thinking, breathing, and living.
Yeah, I definitely believe in that too, because it's more about path than about destination. And still, like, I see like feedback loop. If you are doing something that you really love, it's getting better and better. So you love it more and more. So I can imagine me doing the same in 20, 30 years and still be in love with what I do, because it's like feedback loop. And I really like this situation, like you do something meaningful, your skills goes up because you like it, and then you have like greater impact. So it's a feedback loop.
It's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is, I think it's in many ways, like if you think about it, like from the point of view of parenthood, right? You know, when you're a parent, when the child is young, they're very, very little. A lot of people struggle, new parents, because the baby can't give you a lot of feedback. Right? I mean, they'll coo, they'll giggle maybe, you know, as they get a little older, but they can't tell you I love you or thank you or, you know, but as they get older, they start giving you more and more positive reinforcement, and parents need that. I think the same way people do in the rest of the aspects of their life, they need for those little things, and then those bigger things that validate what they're doing makes a difference and makes them feel good about, you know, what they're pursuing. Yeah.
And it's about to like really know your emotions, because you can do something and have very negative emotions, and you can do something quite similar and you can have a lot of positive emotions. And it's often connected with purpose, with sense of purpose. I really believe in that, and I read a lot of research about the fact that if you have a purpose, you love what you do. If you don't have it, there is a higher chance of depression and so on. So like we together were at the same panel, and we are discussing things like purpose-driven organizations.
Yeah.
I want to discuss this concept here too, because
one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, for me, it's the way how to change companies around the globe, like to be more purpose-driven. So what is your experience like trying to change that huge 100,000 employees company to be more purpose-driven?
Well, I got to tell you, people say this, you know, offhandedly, but it is a process. It takes time. Yeah. I think anyone who comes in and says, we're going to change the culture of this organization are kidding themselves. Yeah. There's an analogy that I like to use, that culture is a lot like the air. You know, you can't see it. So there are a lot of people that will deny its existence, but yet you know it's there, because when it's working, the wind is at your back, the air is blowing your back, and you get a headwind that pushes you faster. But the other thing is that when it's polluted, when it's contaminated, you can't breathe. It's suffocating. And then I would say the thing that's in it, we all know that in air, you need oxygen. And oxygen for me is the purpose. Without the oxygen, you don't have the air. And it's the same thing when it comes to culture, that you can't see it. It doesn't exist right away. It requires for the oxygen to actually be pumped into it in order for it to work. So when I think about my experience at a variety of companies, or even coaching, or being part of a religious institution, the thing that people struggle with is that they immediately think that they can set up a culture like a project plan. And that doesn't work. Yep. It doesn't work. Culture is not a project. It's not a to-do list that you check off on. And that's what people have to get through their heads, is that the moment you make it transactional is the moment you kill it. So does that mean then that you have to just say, well, we can't control it, therefore we won't do anything? And that's not true either. I think it's absolutely pivotal to start thinking through as a process, a thoughtful process, not a transaction or a to-do list.
Yeah.
How do we shift something? And I think it starts with really understanding what's the ethos, like what is your higher calling in this organization? And I'll give you an example. So I was just recently in Israel for an innovation conference, and there's a company called SodaStream, if you're familiar with them. I think some of the folks may have heard of them. It's carbonated, carbonation machine that you press it, it pushes the carbonation into it. And instead of buying soda or seltzer, it does it for you. And they've said that, part of our purpose is to eliminate plastic one bottle at a time. Sounds great.
Sounds great.
But then you have to ask yourself, do we really do that? Maybe our product does that, but do we do it?
Okay.
Is that our purpose? So how do you know? The way you know is, are they walking around, or do they have, commitments to cleaning up beaches where people leave empty soda bottles and other plastics? Because if that's what you really believe, then that's what you do when nobody else is watching.
Yeah.
And that's what starts to build not just a reinforcement of your purpose, that creates culture. That's what really creates it. That when your employees, your customers, your competitors, the general public sees that they're not just about dogma, they're about actually doing what they say. And it's so important to step back and ask, what are we really doing here? Yeah. I think that a lot of companies, and I've worked for more than a few of them, that when you looked at their vision, it was about, we're going to be the number one company in this industry. We're going to return value to shareholders. That's great. Those are goals.
It's uninspiring.
That's about as inspiring as saying that I'm going to put on brown shoes this morning. Yeah. That's just completely flat. And we as we've talked about before, Peter, is that the thing that keeps people innovating is the will to do something different beyond what you normally can or will do. And having a purpose is what gets somebody from doing their job to going and doing things that are extraordinary.
Yep. I really believe in this concept because my experience, I do a lot of consulting, in Europe, Fortune 500 companies, and what I saw many times was that you have leaders, you have a C-level board or something, and you see that they don't believe in what they do. And they often ask me please help us to motivate our employees. And I'm like, okay, but it starts with you. The fish stinks from the head. So what is your life mission? What are your values? And at the end, sometimes it's very sad. Even the top leaders, they don't know their purpose. So it's so sad. Mostly they are then motivated by some KPI, some, short-term growth, but it's not inspiring for employees. So for me, it's not just the problem of education, but it's problem of leadership too. At the core is the leadership.
I agree. Somebody said, I don't know who said this, but I always thought there was a wisdom in this. And when you lack purpose, everything around you becomes drama.
Yeah.
And everything is transactions.
Yeah.
So if you are a leader and you are so bogged down and you have a calendar that looks like a barcode, it's just one meeting after the next, 7 days a week you're doing the job. Do you ever stop and not just smell the roses? That's a nice cliche, and it is important to do that because they smell nice. But it's more important to ask the question, what am I really doing here?
Yeah.
And I don't think that you're afforded the ability to stop and think and to do this. So when that happens, that sends a very clear and concise message to your employees that we're just going to do what we always done before.
Yeah.
And that's what kills the DNA of organizations.
Right. And we have a data that in this situation, people, they have much higher risk of depression because lack of purpose is one cause of depression. So at the end, they are not just unproductive, but they are unhappy. They spread their unhappiness to the other people, to their employees, to their clients. And in the end, you do a lot of bad things by the lack of purpose. So for me, the purpose is the core, not just for culture, but also for productivity, for leadership, for all those important things.
For happiness.
For happiness too, yeah. Happiness at work is not about to buy foosball. No, it's not about those things.
Although I do like foosball.
Me too. But
Yeah.
Like playing
But it's not just
without
about
purpose.
foosball.
Come on.
You're 100% right about that. You can tell when there's a lack of mirth or a lack of happiness in an office. It's, as you said, it stinks like, from coming down from the top of that fish's head. And it does come down. You see it in the way people are afraid to say what they think. They have conversations in the side halls of the office. When people can't be transparent and can't be their whole selves at work, then you know that they're not happy, and they feel smothered. And I think that is one of the things that is a killer for not just innovation, but just even retention of employees. And you get a fraction of what people do. I'll tell you just a real quick story. A number of years ago, I worked at another pharmaceutical company, a Swiss pharmaceutical company. And it just so happens they had a large office in New Jersey. And the first maybe few weeks that I had started with a new team, they said, we have a regular offsite, we'd like you to come. And I said, of course. And I show up at this offsite, it's at a hotel. And in the hotel, it was in a suite in the hotel, and the entire team sat around in a circle, and we were there for the better part of a full day. And I first thought to myself, what in God's name are we doing here? And it was like circle time. And, immediately my hackles, my defense system went up. But what they were doing, which was different than I've seen before or really even after, is that they had a kind of like a business coach, sort of a business therapist, if you will. The team had some dysfunctions at one point in time, but the team was really communicating and understanding where each other were and understanding each person's purpose as well as aligning on a collective purpose.
Yep.
What I saw was that over the next several years, I worked with this team. Everybody worked for each other. There was an incredible camaraderie. Even if not everybody was the same, and they by far were not the same people, there was an understanding. But more importantly, what I found was that everybody was on the same page. There was a common purpose, and it showed up in the results. This team outperformed every single year where they were budgeted and expected to do. And the whole team, including myself, we did things that we wouldn't have thought of doing before because there was this camaraderie and a purpose. So it doesn't just have to be in a 100,000 person corporation. It could be in a 20-person team.
Right, yeah.
It has to be.
All big companies, they have small teams. So you always can start with small teams and then change the whole.
That's right.
Those small islands of positive deviation.
People start asking, and they did, what's going on with that team? And that happened all the time. People wondering, why do they go off site to a hotel? What are they doing? But the results proved out, as well as the level of happiness. The team liked working with each other. We enjoyed joking around and bantering. And when you have that, even today, it's been about 10 years. In a week's time, I'm meeting up with a group of these guys and gals who we haven't seen each other in a little while. And it transcended the corporate walls and structure. It's what's the foundation of friendship and belonging. And that's a byproduct of purpose. So I think that's one of the things that you can look forward to when you build that, is that you're going to build relationships that transcend the organizational structure.
Yeah, I really believe in that too, because we are evolutionary designed by being social creatures, and our ancestors, they team up next to the campfire, and still we have those parts of the brain that lights up when we do something meaningful with the others. And where your ego goes down, I call it ego 1.0 is when you are selfish, and then I have a concept of ego 2.0 when you do things for the others, like selfless acts and so on. And there's a lot of data that there is a special part of the brain that is activated if you are selfless, if you are doing something that is beyond you, you're helping the others, not because you want something in favor, back, but you do it just because of the purpose.
There was just a researcher I saw speaking at a conference that I was speaking at a couple months back. He's from Harvard University and was talking about a number of studies that they were conducting around giving and how giving, small acts of kindness,
small acts of kindness
versus the receiving. And they did controlled studies of people who kept the gift versus gave the gift. And what they found is it cut across gender, it cut across society and culture, it cut across socioeconomics, which was a very interesting assumption, is that people who have less would be more inclined to keep something of value versus to give it. But in fact, that didn't bear out at all. And they were able to measure neural activity. And to your point about the part of the brain where it gets triggered from a neuroscientific standpoint, it absolutely lights up. And you can see how it really has this long sort of half-life of happiness and benefit. So it's hard to do for some, but I think that awareness is really important.
Yeah, right. And it's about small steps. It's not about, I don't know, to move to Africa and want to change everything there, but it's about to, I don't know, do a little small things for your colleagues. For example, if I prepare my tea, I do it for the colleagues too. Or those are little details.
I appreciate the tea, by the way.
It's a special Japanese tea. It's my signature drink. I'm drinking this tea in all my episodes, so
I like it.
That's a part of the podcast.
It's very good. It feels like it's got very good antioxidant properties.
It has like 3 times more caffeine and L10 than a normal tea, so we're gonna be high. So. Cheers.
Cheers. My hand starts shaking. You'll know why.
So how to teach companies kindness? Kindness is for me very important part of purpose. So how to spread kindness somehow around the globe? What are your ideas for that?
I'll tell you, I like to look to other people who I think were masterful at it. There's a guy that worked with me. His name's Cal. And Cal is a role model of kindness. I mean, it really, he's a person who always looks to do something small and kind and doesn't announce it or broadcast it. But the thing is that when you see it, it leaves an indelible print on you. So I'll give you an example. So we work together at Pfizer. And while we're at Pfizer, there's a gym on the premises. And there are 2 gentlemen who their job is to basically collect clothes and towels because they provide that for you and to wash them. And it's a relatively thankless job. There are people who just never learn manners in life and treat them in a very condescending way. And I would say there are people I chatted with them all the time, but I noticed around the holidays times, Cal said he didn't make a point of it, but I found out sort of secondhand that he went and gave them each cash, just slipped it to them, made no big fuss about it, just to acknowledge, hey, I really appreciate what you do. And it didn't matter about the amount, but the fact that he actually stopped and considered them. I hadn't met a single person who had said that or had done that. And maybe there were other people who did, but it was little acts of kindness and that generosity. And it spread in the day job to the little things, he would consider things for me, just little things that I just was like, wow, this is a person who stops and considers people first. And he was not just a proponent of building culture, he was asked to lead a cultural task force. And he said, I don't like the idea of doing a task force. It should be how we be. It should be our raison d'etre. And it was very interesting because he struggled with that. And, it's when you try to sanction happiness and giving and kindness in an organization, you maybe reduce it to a transaction where it loses its meaning.
Right.
It's very tricky because the moment you sanction it, you actually eviscerate the real meaning. But how do you do it? I think you do it through role modeling. You find the people who really believe and act with kindness, and you socialize it in a way that doesn't embarrass them, but it also recognizes the inherent goodness that people do in a corporate organization. And by searching for it and finding it and evangelizing it, it becomes the change that you want to see in the organization. Yeah. It's those little things.
And for me, it's even more I really believe that today's world has some struggles, and companies should play an important role in that, because we spend 1/3 of our life in the office, And if you are happy there, you vote differently, you behave differently on the street. So
True.
I think that like maybe politicians, they don't change the world, but companies can, because they have much more power for that, and they are not organized like politicians are. They sometimes cannot change things because it's too slow. But in companies, we can do that. Like,
you can be
quickly.
faster.
You can be faster. Yeah.
You can be. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting thought. I mean, there's a fundamental question about what is the purpose of organizations. And if you go back, to the time of, Adam Smith, or think about Ricardian economics, the idea of superstructures and these corporate organisms, they are initially thought of as efficient means of transacting. But that's not what they are today. And I think that even with the change of with the gig economy becoming more and more prevalent and less loyalty, you don't see people working 30 plus years for one organization. I still think that people have this fidelity, this connection to where they work and who they work for, even in short amount of time. Maybe there's greater intensity, but whatever that is, it still shapes your identity and your sense of belonging. So I think there is a responsibility beyond just being a vehicle of efficient transactions.
And I think that with younger generation, it's getting even better, because like millennials or those young creative people, they don't want to work just for money. They want to do something meaningful, and they can change the job like that. So companies should change themselves from the inside, because if they want to be like a magnet for talents, they should change the culture.
You're right. I think it's interesting because there was just a study that came out, and it probably mirrors many other studies, and they had looked at a large number of millennials and asked what was your primary motivation in seeking a job. Number one was still salary, but very closely trailing behind it is that it creates meaning and purpose in my life. And they looked at this compared to Gen X's, Gen Y, baby boomers, and it's completely flipped. I mean, purpose was all the way at the bottom. You go further out. So it's been moving up. And so what does that mean? That means that your organization has to minister to that need. The question is, though, is your leadership, if your leadership are baby boomers or Gen Xers, I'm a Gen Xer, have we grown up and conditioned in a certain way where we might minimize it? I do hear people saying like, this is how millennials are. And then they're like, they're a bunch of wimps. Like they still are looking to be coddled by their mom and dad. And I think the problem is that when you start to pillory or insult, this is kind of who they are, then you're minimizing it, and you're gonna have a lot of struggle to be able to design for it. And at the end of the day, if that's who they are, we need to design for it to get the most and the best out of people. So I think it is very interesting because the change is real. And the fact that so many millennials are now making up our workforce today and will continue to means that we need to pivot the way we think.
And we have to change the leadership, because like as we said, like those people, they don't want to work under pressure of extrinsic motivation, under pressure of carrot and stick. They really want to do something from their heart, like to have intrinsic motivation, to really want to change the world a little bit. And what is good is that I see the change. Like I do consulting last 8 years, and I really see the difference now and 5 years ago. And it's like major transition. Like and what is very good is all companies are trying to change themselves. All like banks, like telco companies, IT companies, they trying to change themselves. And for me, it's one of the best thing today, because it can influence a lot of lives, a lot of people, and at the end, people would be happier. So for me, it's just a great time to live in, because I cannot imagine to work like 50 years ago. Like that was crazy. We have a freedom at work, we have happiness at work, and maybe we are the first generation that can have purpose at work too.
It's funny when you think back to your first job, or even before your first job, maybe what you were planning to study. When I was 16 or 17 years old, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I said to my parents, my mom taught at Rutgers University for quite a while. She taught literature and technical writing. My dad was a math teacher in the New York school system. They both were educators, and they said, don't go into education. Do something where you can make a living and learn about business. And I said to them, like, I really like people's human stories, so I want to be a journalist. And my parents were like, oh, God, you'll never make a living. And, I said, I want to study literature and journalism, and they were nauseated. They're like, are you crazy? You'll never make a living. You'll end up in the poorhouse. And they were so afraid, and I understand where they're coming from. They have this shtetl mentality of, you're going to be stuck living paycheck to paycheck and trying to figure things out. And, I think the thing that they overlooked, and they were projecting their own experience, and they're right because it was their experience, is that, you want safety and comfort, but we also know as human beings that the highest kind of pyramid or triangle is the idea of self-actualization.
Right, and
that
you
create meaning and purpose
educator
in our
too.
lives.
Like that's funny because you are working on your book now, so you are educator.
That's
your
true.
Parents are. That's funny because I have the same story. Like both my parents are educators. I was studying like IT, then I was studying law, and at the end I'm educator too. Maybe it's our life mission to be educators.
Well, it is. I would say I don't believe in predestiny, but I do believe that we do have genetic predispositions. We have environmental predispositions. Growing up, my parents, they always read to us. They would go as an outing to the library and they would say, come and read, read a book, learn. My brother was a voracious reader, still is today. And, so education, discussion, debate was always part of our culture and part of our household sort of the mindset and the spirit in the house. So when you have that, it creates a likelihood that you want to be an educator, that you want to constantly learn and you want to share that. So you just have to find where, and I actually think it's a really cool thing that you could go somewhere which is very traditional and stifling and actually be a ray of light where there's not enough of it. So that's a great thing. There was a saying about where do you find the best art. If you want to find the most inspiring art, don't go to a museum, go to a junkyard, somewhere where it's unexpected. And that's where you'll find the most unlikely sources of inspiration. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing for this. Like, if you want to be at a university, that's fine. But at a university, it's normalized, it's expected. Yeah. Go to a place where it's not expected and normalized, a place where they're deprived, and you bring that. That's where you can bring inspiration. I think in large companies that a lot of people are both, sort of inspiration and play deprived. Can you bring that and change the way people feel and think?
Yeah.
That's how real change happens. You got to do it from the inside.
I want to ask you about your values. So can you somehow summarize your life values now? Like
that's
quite difficult, but it's my favorite question. And I ask this question all the time. All episodes are about values and life mission. So what are your values?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. It's one of the ones that you probably want to spend hours and days memorializing. I probably have it written down in my notes in my phone just to keep reaffirming. I would say that one of the top ones is curiosity. Never stop learning. Yep. Never stop asking. The moment you do that is the moment you get frozen in time, that you become a complete monolith. Yep. So that's one of them. The other one is going to sound cliche, but it's something I've grown into, is family. And and it's not just the notion of family, of mom, dad, kids, but it's an idea about the going above and beyond what you normally think you can do. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, being in the gym and you're working out and you feel like you hit the wall and you have to find that extra gear, something that's in reserve that you didn't know you have. And I see that for family, because there'll be times in your life where you're going to run out of inspiration. You're going to be stuck. I mean, I'll give you an example. He's not family, but he's like family. He's a friend, a person I only became friends with, a handful of years ago. We had a massive leak in our house. And if you've ever had a leak and the floor is, the ceiling is destroyed, and it's, got 3 kids. My wife's like, holy crap, what are we going to do? And it's 11 o'clock at night or 10:30 at night. And as I found out, I picked up the phone in an instant and called him and said, hey, Jeff, have a problem. You ask me what it is, I tell him, and he said, I'm on my way home, I'm gonna drop this guy off, I'll be there in 15 minutes. And sure as hell, 15 minutes, he was right there. And that's the idea of family, of the support system that you will do for other people, not as a quid pro quo, like, hey, don't forget about me, but it's you do it because you want to give back. You want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. So that idea of family, a superstructure, is something that really I value. And I don't know if I valued it enough when I was younger, but as I've grown older, you really do. And then you have to look, how can I give more of me? So I would say that that's a second tenet that I believe very strongly in. And, you know, I would say one more thing that I really do believe strongly in is this idea of just kind of small acts of kindness. And that goes hand in hand with, you know, the aforementioned, but what little thing can I give to anybody, anywhere, at any time? Little things, because I think it just changes the way you approach life. And it's only been a little while that this has become steeped in what I believe. But if you constantly go around in life thinking about what can I get, what can I get, what can I get, which is what most of us do. We think about our needs, and it's normal, it's human, it's animal nature. If you change that around and think about what can I give, what can I give, what can I give, it's an absolute reversal. It really is. And I thought it was a total load of BS at first, but then I tried it. And that has changed the way I approach people and I approach things, as opposed to like, what can I get from this thing with Peter today? You know, versus what can I give Peter? What can I give the people that are listening? Like, maybe there's something that's useful. Maybe there's something that will make someone's, you know, life a little bit better. Maybe it'll do nothing at all, but you give something, you know, you get. So I think those are just a few. I'm sure there's many others I'm glossing over, but, you know, truth be told, you know, it's an evolutionary thing. You keep thinking about what do you believe in, and you keep asking, and you keep building on it.
Yeah, the curiosity is very important to me too, because like, as you said, like if you stop learning, you're stuck. And for me, it's the end. Like it's the end of the life because you are just the same, and it means that you are not growing. So it means that you are like literally slowly dying without any. I read a beautiful study that passive elderly, they have like 50% higher chance of Alzheimer's disease if they are passive and without purpose. Interesting. They have purpose, they have 50% less Alzheimer's diseases. And those data are incredible because it seems that if you train your brain long term, even if you are 90 years old and you train it, it's become like better and better in time. The neuroplasticity works even if you are 100.
That's true. You're right. Neuroplasticity still continues on. They've shown well into your advanced years. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen this in, you know, your family or other folks you know, but there's been a consistent pattern that I've seen. You retire, and then people go into retirement, and they go into a mini depression because they're not sure what to do with themselves. It's funny. I've asked a lot of friends, you know, where do you see yourself in 10 or 15 years? And almost everybody says, not all, but many people say the same thing. I'm like, oh, well, I'll be retired. I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to travel. And I said, that's great. But that's sort of the...
That's not the purpose.
Yeah, that's the what. That's what you're going to do. But why? Yeah. What's your why? Like, why are you going to do something? Like, and it's interesting. You ask that and people are, I don't know. I don't think about it that much. But it will hit them. I know with my father, and I saw this with, you know, several people who I'm close to, who they retired. My dad retired young. He retired at 50 years old as a teacher. Got a buyout package. They wanted to take the most, you know, the highest paid teachers in New York City and put them on the sidelines, you know, for economic reasons. And, you know, it was a good buyout package. And then he was left wondering, what am I going to do with myself?
Yeah. And we have data for this. Like if you see the data for depression rate, if people retire, it goes like that. Like the graph for depression, it goes like really up. But there's one place on Earth that is different, and it's island of Okinawa. Like maybe you know that because in Okinawa is my favorite Japanese island because they have beautiful beaches, beautiful nature, and beautiful people. Because there on Okinawa they live they have the longest lifespan around the globe. They literally live 5 to 10 years longer than we do. And they did a lot of research on that, like long-term study, 10 years long. And they found that the key for longevity on Okinawa is that they don't retire. They don't have a word for retirement. And they, even if they are 90, 70, 80, they have a life purpose. They call it ikigai. This is the Japanese word for long-term life purpose. And now we have a data. If you have that ikigai, if you have that long-term sense of purpose, you have like really lower risk of cardiovascular diseases, lower risk of stroke, lower risk of cancers, and you live 5 to 10 years longer. And for me, it's amazing. So the key for longevity is not to retire.
Or to move to Okinawa.
Of course, yeah.
Either one. I'm going to book my next flight to Tokyo and then come on over to Okinawa. There's a U.S. military base.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
I'm surprised that doesn't create more anxiety. They've been long petitioning to get the U.S. out off the base.
Yeah,
think about how much longer they would live if they didn't have the military there.
Yeah, when I was there, there were some protests against the bases there, and because when you are swimming in the sea, you see all those planes going around, so you really feel the military there.
Yeah,
that's right. But still, the island is so beautiful. So if you have time, visit Okinawa. And I have so many stories from there. Like I arrived.
I put it right on my list.
I arrived and I rented my car, and it was my first time I was driving on the opposite side. And the capital is huge.
It's on the opposite side?
Yeah, they're on the opposite side. I was there with a small car, and for me, it was so crazy. And everything was in Japanese, but still, I love the place. Yeah. Because you really, I went to market on Saturday, and I saw that average like the age was like 90, really. And those older people, they were smiling a lot. And they were not just buying there, they were selling there too. So, and I have a lot of pictures from that market that all those centurions were selling their things and they were happy and smiling. So it's so inspiring to me. And I really believe that we can somehow transfer these ideas here in European and US workspace too.
Is the lifespan longer in Okinawa than it is on the mainland?
Yeah, it's like the average mainland is 84 and Okinawa is like 90. So even difference between
that's
Japan
statistically
and Okinawa,
significant.
Yeah.
I wonder why on the mainland it's not the same. Is it
because I haven't answered.
It's created its own subculture, it seems.
No, because I really think that I love Japan. I was there like 8 times, and you see the difference between corporate Japan world, like being in Tokyo.
Yeah.
They have 1 day off, 1 week off, and mostly they don't take it because they want to be loyal to the company.
1 week off for the whole year?
For the whole year.
Why are they so generous?
They don't take it. First 15, 20 years, they don't take it.
My God.
So, and they have the higher chance of depression there, and they have a lot of struggles. So you don't want to work there for a big Japanese corporation because it's so crazy. So that's why the whole Japan has like lower, still, well, it's better than we do. But Okinawa is very different because it's small and...
I found it very interesting. I'd worked in Japan a little bit as well. Not as extensively, it sounds like, as you've traveled and been in Japan. But one of the things that really struck me was that as I worked with our Japanese teams, that we would have calls which were convenient for the US time, and the entire teams would be in the office at 11 o'clock at night. And that was not atypical. And I wondered, like, when do they go to sleep? When do they take a break? And that's not good. Certainly, that's not a sustainable culture.
Yeah.
And you can see it's affected GDP. They've had a contracting market or economy in Japan, and they blame it on the banking institutions, but it's a reflection, I think, perhaps of the ethos or the culture. It must be. That certainly seems to be a correlated factor.
And what is funny is that my book was published there, so maybe in 5 years I destroy this system there.
You can play a part of a role of getting them to change in their nature of procrastinating.
Yeah, because like one of the main idea is to really step out from the box and be like the one who's not following the crowd.
Yeah.
And Japanese, they always follow the crowd. So I was just wondering, like, now everyone is like reading the book, and in a subway there are those lines. They are waiting in lines, and after 1 year, I'm gonna destroy all Tokyo.
So I have to ask you. So let me turn and ask you a question. Japan is a microcosm of corporate culture in a way, in that it is it's frowned upon to deviate or to stand apart, and the traditional corporate structure is about continuity, systematic approach, efficiency. But it's been very hard to change the Japanese culture.
Yep.
How do you break the norms that are so deeply entrenched that they're spiritual, they're cultural, it's part of the heritage? In some companies, people feel the same, because we may look back only a few generations that are relatable, and granted, there are not that many samurais that work for Pfizer, but the people do look back. It's 150 years, and they say this is the legacy and the tradition, and they feel uncomfortable bucking that. How do you do that in Japan? Like, what are things that are being done or could be done? And I wonder if they could be translatable to organisms like, the Pfizers and AT&Ts and Verizons of the world.
That's a brilliant question. Like, I think that they like it this way. Even if they are unhappy, they somehow like it because, as you said, it's like embedded in their culture. And for me, still, Japan is like really, really different. I love to go there, but I don't want to live there because of those reasons. And for me, it's more about change companies here and inspire the others, because here we have a really freedom to change stuff. And I really believe that if you do a better design of company, at the end, the productivity goes up. And then you can inspire even Japanese companies because they want to grow too. So if we do a blueprint of future corporation that will be purpose driven and so on, then we can inspire them. But I think that we cannot change Japanese corporate world from inside.
Maybe it's just just thinking about it is changing about one person at a time. And that becomes a rising tide eventually. That and we saw that. We actually had a Japanese colleague who was part of our innovation network, who was super active, incredibly enthusiastic and positive. He did not fit the traditional mold of a corporate citizen in a Japanese institution or organization. But what really made him stand out was all the unique things he did, and I think maybe we inspired him. Now that one person, will he have a ripple effect? Time will tell, but that's the hope. So maybe you're right. It is about creating that rising tide through individuals and motivating them. That's the hope.
To set up some outliers there in the structure, and they slowly spread the ideas.
So I have a personal philosophy. Some of it is rooted in the work that I did when I was leading worldwide innovation at Pfizer, is that you have to engage individuals, but at the end of the day, change happens through networks. So you have to find ways to cultivate networks of people, and informal networks have been around for centuries and centuries. There's a great book by this guy Neil Ferguson, who I studied under at New York University when I studied economics, and Ferguson has a book called The Tower and the Square, and it refers back to the Siena. So Siena, if anyone's ever been there, there's the huge tower which represents the power structure, the oligarchy, the aristocrats. And that's where the sort of formal structured power lies. But then there's the square, and if you've seen the square, it's a beautiful square in Siena, and that's where things really happened. And his supposition is that from the beginning of time, from the Illuminati to, you look at, kind of unions, and there's the formal structures, and then there's the informal structures, and informal structures, informal networks is how change really happens. So my hypothesis is, and it was when I was at Pfizer, is can you create and galvanize change by building these networks and then allowing them to act informally. So you create a structure around it, but the structure is a loose confederation. So you're inspiring, you're giving resources, you're enabling and connecting them, but you're allowing them to thrive. And you might even do a little bit of human management, little human capital management by identifying who are people that should be connected to that network, and you do the kind of interconnecting and training to get them to feel like they're their own living ecosystems. We did that. And I actually did see huge changes across Pfizer where it comes to innovation by fostering these networks.
And that's great, yeah. Definitely, that's the brilliant idea, like to really build these networks, because normally like you think about structural like hierarchy, but those networks are often bottom up.
Yes.
And they are informal. And I think that like all companies, they need to have those structures too, because of course you have some, I don't know, the written structure, but it doesn't work like that. If you need something, you approach that guy.
That's right.
And all important meetings are next to the coffee machine and so on. So like we worked like that for many centuries. So
there's a story that I tell. There was a group that years ago at one of the companies I worked with. I was early in my career, and it was like a cigar smoking club. And I've never even smoked a cigarette, so I was kind of like, yeah, I don't. And initially, the naive person that I was, kind of in the beginning of my career, I'm like, I'm not joining this. I don't smoke cigars. I don't believe in tobacco. And but what it really was, it was a group of guys that really talked about how people got promoted, how things really happened in the organization. And it was an informal thing. And the vehicle was, or the reason they gave was cigar smoking. But what it was really about was something else. Now, was that a conscious choice? I think it was somewhere here in the viscera, the guts, that people knew what it really is, but they call it something else. And I think that's often the case. But I think if you want to be an engineer of change in an organization, that you have to actually design in a way that gives them these cigar clubs.
Right.
And then you pump in certain things into it, but you also allow for natural market forces in human nature to take shape. So they're going to form and shape differently, the way rock formations do over time in canyons, but at the same time they still have the same bedrock. They still form the same sort of little tributaries that cut through them, and they are going to look and feel different, but they'll have the same being. And you can help shape that, the hand of God, so to speak. Do ex machina. That's.
I have quite a similar story. Like in Prague, we have a private club that is called Eccentric Club, and it's like you have to be member. But all like important people, like founders, CEOs, they are circling around. And if you go there, you have like 100% chance you meet like 4 new super interesting people. So it's like the cigar club, and it's like we are drinking their absinthe. That is very, very strong alcohol, but it has special, like, you have a fontaine in the middle of the table, so you have to group together next to the fontaine that is 4 pipes, so you just put some water in the absinthe, and you have to do it together. And
it's absinthe?
It's absinthe.
Oh, that's the days of Van Gogh. And
so whenever you're gonna be in Prague, be my guest there, and we can drink absinthe there.
All right,
It's like I have 2 signature drinks. One is this tea, and second one is absinthe in Prague.
Wasn't absinthe was known or noted for having hallucinogenic properties?
Yeah, but that's why
people would walk into. I remember they said people would walk into mirrors, and I've never had absinthe, however.
Because it's forbidden here, so you can buy absinthe here, but without that important substance there. So there are only a few countries it's legal. So one is Czech Republic, second is I think Switzerland. So.
The real absinthe that goes back to the days of the impressionists sitting in the cafes in Paris.
And it has very nice effect, because it's different than when you are drinking beer. You are like suppressed, but when you are drinking absinthe, it's like you are cognitively like you are intelligent, more creative. So it's a special absinthe club. So I want to show you that place when I visit Prague.
Very intriguing. Very intriguing. Why is that banned in the U.S. now? Now that we're repealing the laws around cannabis are all slowly beginning to fall. I mean, they have in California, in Colorado, I think in Washington, and there's Massachusetts as well. And although it just got shot down in my home state of New Jersey, but it's starting to change, so that could be interesting to see. Yeah. Maybe
I can do a movement.
You could do a movement, galvanize. The absinthe movement begins right here on Mulberry Street in New York City.
Okay, next time.
Right in the middle of Little Italy.
Next time I'm gonna bring the fontaine here, and I start to smuggle absinthe here, and then slowly I change the road.
I just don't want to put it on record that I encourage you to get incarcerated.
Okay, I have new life purpose now.
That's true. At least for the next couple of months.
That was amazing discussion. Like my last question all the time is like, according to your experience again, what do you think is the purpose of life? That's the like deepest question ever. So, what do you think? Like,
I think that it's up to every individual, and so you can speak for yourself. But I think in broad strokes, it's about making meaning. Like, what am I going to make meaningful in this lifetime? And that's a question I think that we should all ask. Like, how do I make meaning? Now, some people think it means like building statues or, passing on financial legacies. And for some people that is the meaning that's important to them. But I find that very fleeting. So the question is, like, for you as an individual, for me, the thing that I want to do is that I want to leave behind not just a legacy for my children who are, they're a reflection upon you, but more than that is that I want to know there was unintended consequences, positive consequences of people I've come into contact with in the workplace, in coaching soccer and wrestling, that you left something that made other people happy and better. So for me, that's a hard and it's an unquantifiable thing. But in life, we don't have a scorecard of KPIs that tell us whether or not we really made a difference. So you have to just go on faith. So I think that you go through it and keep asking yourself, what am I going to do in my life that's going to create meaning? And not just for me, but for other people. And I think that is the meaning for me, that what you create will be last for another legacy. I've thought about this, and it's interesting because my middle daughter has very red hair. And I'm not a redhead, although I had like red highlights, and my wife didn't really have red hair. But there was a family member a couple generations ago that people swear that she is just like. And you think about that legacy that somebody from 4 or 5 generations ago has imbued and has given, and it keeps showing up. And it's not just about your DNA. There's this idea of epigenetics. You have your gene pool, but the things you do in your life will shape the epigenetics. You can actually change your destiny. And I do believe that. So the meaning of life is about creating the best epigenetic outcomes so that the next generation, yours and others, can be better, can be happier, can create meaning for themselves. We're far from a perfect civilization, very far. Maybe today is, right now, the generation we live in, people question, but maybe there's positive consequences of that will continue to make meaning for the next generations. Time will tell. I think that it's up to us to define for each and every one of ourselves what is the meaning of life. But for me, it's what do you do that you're going to pass on in the next generation for yours and others that will make it a better and more happier and more innovative place.
That was brilliant, like one of the best definition I ever heard. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to be my guest here.
I'm glad I didn't think about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Or maybe I've been thinking about it all this time.
Yeah, that's why I call it deep talks. It's improvisation, but
thoughts.
At the end, like brilliant ideas happen, and the reason is tea, of course.
That's it. Are you sure there's not absinthe spiked in this?
Okay, the next episode, like I wanna tell you that let's say in 1 year, I'm gonna invite you again, and next time we're gonna do an absinthe episode.
I like it. I'm ready for it. It'll be interesting to see what will be new in the world and in our lives.
Yep. Let's do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you to our listeners. Take care.
Listeners.
And see you with the next episode.
See you the next time.